Is there such a thing as too much horsepower? Yeah. On the normal roads and in the hands of regular people, there absolutely is. Hey guys, Stype here, and this is my list of the top 7 cars that could have had a bit less power! Alright, let's go. Aston Martin Vantage. After they made a name for themselves as a maker of high-class Grand Tours, Aston Martin, for some reasons, thought it was time to start producing hairy-chested muscle cars instead. There was the DBS, the AM V8, the Virage, and ultimately, this roided-up Vantage V550, 550 being the amount of horsepower. In 1992, that amount was more than any Lamborghini, Ferrari, the XJ220, and a hell of a lot more than the Virage's 330, on which it was based. So how did they do it? Easy. They just brute forced it with not one, but two big, meaty, Eaton superchargers. One for each bank of cylinders. Last time there was so much overkill, dinosaurs got wiped out.
Terrorists win.
Naturally, it wasn't just that. A beefier suspension was installed too because the rear tires kept hitting the wheel arches when launching, and the brakes that were fitted were larger than on any other production car ever. Well, they needed to be because the Vantage was still a 4,000-pound car with mahogany wood, 4 seats, steel chassis, and more. In the end, all that grunt was just used for rubberizing the road and not much else. The V550 was too heavy to set any 0 to 60 or lap records and too boxy to break the 200-mile-per-hour mark either. Simply put, it could have had less power too. I said less, not more! 06 Impala SS was kind of a garbage. If you ever wondered why this latest Impala never got its SS version 2, it's because this one ruined it all.
Shame on you!
The main issue, aside from the fact that it was front-wheel drive and it looked like an NPC car from a video game, was that it had too much power! In their wisdom, GM thought that the best way to bring back the old muscle car feel was to give it a 5.3-liter LS4 V8. Yes, a V8. Front wheels. Now, because the engine and the tranny could only be mounted transversely, this car ended up with one drive shaft longer than the other. This asymmetry is typical for 99% of all front-wheel drives, but it is also what causes the infamous torque steer if the car has over 200 horses. And how much power do the Impala SS have? 300 big V8 horses. Hit the gas, and instead of going straight, you'll have to wrestle it from going into the ditch. And look, there are ways to combat this issue. Honda played with the suspension geometry to keep the 350 horsepower Civic Type R in check, and the Impala's twin from Pontiac, the Grand Prix GXP, had upgraded shocks, struts, and much wider front tires too. But the Chevy? Nothing. They just dumped a big old V8 in the front-wheel drive platform and called it a day. Something nice to say about it? It sounded good. Pretty good. Ferrari 812 Superfast. From their first ever road car, the 166, to the 8 generations later, the 599 Fiorano. These road-going Ferraris with a V12 up front all followed a simple recipe. Part elegance, part power, and voila, a perfect GT. But then in 2012, this recipe changed dramatically. That's when the 730 horsepower F12 was unleashed, and suddenly a guy who made millions by shouting power had this to say about it.
But I think it would be better still if it had a bit less power.
So did Ferrari listen? No. They went even more nuts with the next one. This is the 812 Superfast, which comes with a very descriptive name, you have to agree, and 800 horsepower under the hood. That's not a good thing. A Grand Tourer with 800 horses is like beer with 80% alcohol. You'll have to be very careful with how you consume it. Remember what the GTs were all about? Smooth sailing across the country in a powerful, but above all, a relaxing car. Well, with the Superfast, you'll be more relaxed locked in a room with a bear than driving it. It's a psycho with wheels, and most reviewers agree 800 is simply
too fast to use on the road.
I also hate the fact that this is the only Ferrari with a number of horsepower in its name, which shows you exactly what their priorities were. Meanwhile, the design is not elegant at all. Seriously, what is this? It has more cuts and blades than Edward Scissorhands. Hashtag bring back Pininfarina. R34 GTR. During the 1980s, Japan was overflowing with the abundance of sports cars coming from every major manufacturer. This started causing quite a lot of havoc on the streets, which then made the Japanese government very angry. Fearing the stricter repercussions, the Association of Japanese Car Makers came up with a plan. No one will make a car with more than 276 horsepower, understood? It was sort of a gentleman's agreement, and it ensured that all Japanese sports cars were more or less equal. However, it didn't take long before a clear hierarchy was formed. I know that power is not everything, but with some models it seemed like they were outright lying. Take the Mitsubishi GTO as an example. It had the same spec, same engine, same everything as its American 3000 GT twin, except in Japan, the power figure was simply 276. The same thing happened with the JDM versus USA Supra, and then on top there was the biggest cheater of them all, the Skyline GTR. It was never sold outside of Japan, so 276 horses is the only official figure, but these dudes dyno tested one, and they found out that it actually makes 300 on the wheels. That comes out to around 360 horses on the crank. Everyone thought that the GTR was the top dog because of its computerized all-wheel drive system. Yeah, no. Having a lot more power than anyone else does the trick too. Rimac Nevera. But let's get serious for a moment. Should cars have their power limited to a certain number? The way things are going, it's bound to happen for sure. Just look at the Rimac Nevera, an all-wheel drive, all-electric hypercar with 1,914 horsepower, or in other words, 2,000. It does 0 to 60 in 1.74 seconds. That is lose your lunch kind of fast. 2.3 seconds later, and you'll be doing 120. Need I remind you what a crash at such speeds looks like? And all it takes is 4 seconds. 4 seconds from a standstill to this meat and metal casserole. Have $2 million? Here are the keys to your rocket ship. Now go out there and mix with the crowds. Also keep in mind that we're talking about the first hyper EV. The technology has just arrived and we're already at 2,000 horses. The next one will have what? 4,000? Or will the government step in and put an end to this madness?
This is madness!
In fact, it's already happening. Following the fatal incident that happened in 2019, Australia is introducing a special license for ultra-high performance vehicles. Anything with over 370 horses per ton, and you'll need to pass a special course to be able to drive it. Now, I know what you're thinking. 370 isn't that much at all, but what happens when even a regular family saloon reaches such a figure? You don't think this could happen again? Well, maybe it won't. Mercedes CLK DTM. Not that long ago, any AMG, big or small, was just a luxurious muscle car made for destroying your expensive tires and making you happy about it.
Nice.
Among this Arkham Asylum crowd, one car stood out as the ultimate rubber muncher, the CLK DTM. It was a tribute to the all-conquering DTM race car from which it inherited the wide body kit and the copious amounts of carbon fiber, but the engine? Yeah, that came from a very different kind of car. A hypercar called the Mercedes McLaren SLR. That caused a bit of a problem. You see, with 620 horsepower and 207 miles per hour top speed, the SLR was supposed to be this unrivaled, end-all, be-all, ultimate Mercedes, which can't be if an equally powerful but much cheaper little brother is keeping up with it. So how did the Germans fix this? They software limited the DTM to 199 miles per hour because the tires can't handle anymore, which you know is bullshit. And to make sure the SLR always gets to that 199 first, they gave the DTM a smaller supercharger too. Less power, less speed, that's it. Otherwise, they're mechanically the same. So, which one would you pick? The Hyper SLR or the Underdog? Keep in mind that the Underdog is much more exclusive, more valuable these days, and after 20 years still is by far the most powerful small coupe Mercedes has ever made. Well, that's what you get when you have a hypercar engine under the hood. Now, before I reveal my surprise number one, here are some honorable mentions. See if you can guess them. And at number one, TVR Speed 12. When the McLaren F1 came out and started setting speed records left and right, the boss of TVR, Peter Wheeler, took that personally. Not sure why. It's not like TVR was the reigning champ at the time, but anyway, they fought back with this. The Speed 12, which was the most evil car ever made. Just look at the way it talks to the driver.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
It also had a 7.7 liter naturally aspirated V12, which made an unknown amount of horsepower. They tried to test it on a dyno that was rated up to 1,000 horses, but the machine just blew up. Then they tried measuring just one wheel at a time, which came out as 480 per side. Lastly, there's the official claim from TVR that it made 800. Either way, it was too much. The Speed 12 weighed just 2,200 pounds, and because it was against the TVR's philosophy, it had no safety electronics whatsoever. Apparently, if you rely on these systems too much, they'll make you a worse driver and you'll eventually crash. Okay, that makes sense, kinda, but not in a car that weighs less than a Miata. And instead of starting an engine, you're igniting a bomb. Old Pete would finally come to his senses after taking the finished prototype for a test drive. The very next day, it was canceled. Speed 12 is just too wild for the road, he said, and that's coming from someone who's a racing veteran. In the end, all the prototypes were scrapped except for one, this one, with a high downforce GT1 body kit and an engine detuned to just 840 horses. Yeah, that's much safer now. Anyways, that's the list. Go watch something else, and I'll see you in the next one.